Oh, hey. Aha! Science.
I'm excited for this one. Now, I'm doing something a little bit different today, so don't hate me. But today we're going to be looking at some of the science of my heritage, something that growing up to me was very important. You see, on March 3rd, a Netflix documentary is coming out called Murder Among the Mormons. And you may not know it, but I grew up as a very Orthodox Mormon, also known as Latter-day Saints. And so that's why I'm so good at smiling and making cookies for people. And I am going to use the term Mormon through this video. I know that the current leader of the church likes to use the term Latter-day Saints, the full name of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints, but I like to use Mormons, so what do you do? And here's the other thing. I really don't want to go into religious beliefs here. That is not my purpose. I am a comedy science show. However, this documentary features some very interesting science that I do want to talk about. The whole premise of the documentary is this man named Mark Hofmann who goes and creates some religious forgeries that he is able to sell to the Mormon church. And the method of how he was able to create these forgeries and how they were able to figure out that they were forgeries uses a lot of science, and it's really cool. And so that's what I want to talk about. But we're not going to talk about Mark Hofmann today, no, because the documentary hasn't come out, and I want people to be able to watch it. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing a prequel. So there's another famous Mormon forgery case that happened over a century ago about the Kinderhook plates. And so this week we're going to be talking about this early Mormon forgery, the Kinderhook plates, and next time we'll be talking more about Mark Hofmann's stuff after the documentaries come out, and so people are able to watch it and see exactly what's going on. So today we're doing Kinderhook plates. Next time we're doing Mark Hofmann. Both of these are science-based Mormon religious forgeries. But of course, we are going to have to talk a little bit about Mormon history in order to really understand where we're at here. And so if that's going to bother you, feel free to click away. But honestly, we're not going to go and get into any religious details. I think it's interesting. But hey, I get it. I won't be offended. Don't worry, I'm used to it. Oh, better go get that. Hello? Oh, hi, would you like to watch a science-based comedy show about the science of detecting forgeries?
Oh, I'm really sorry, but now's not a good time. Meow. Yeah, my cat. yeah, my cat. Meow. It's in the washer?
Oh, do you have any neighbors or friends or family who would be interested in the show?
No, thank you. Maybe later. Okay, bye.
All right. Have a good day.
It's okay. I get it.
So let's put on our history caps and tell the story of the Kinderhook plates. So, it was the year 1843 and... excuse me. It was the year 1843 and a group of people were digging up an ancient Native American burial mound near Kinderhook, Illinois. Now, in this area, there were lots of Native American burial mounds, known by a group of Native American people called the Mound Builders. And they would go and dig up these mounds out of curiosity and trying to find ancient treasures. And so it wasn't very culturally appropriate, not very nice, but that's what they were doing. So these people, they were digging up this mound looking for treasure. And so the people, they were digging up this mound, and three of the men who were helping to dig the mound thought it'd be a really funny joke, a good prank. I mean, a real zinger. If they would make out some fake copper plates and write some strange symbols on them and then bury them in the mound so that when the other guys would dig them up, they would think it was some ancient metal record of the people who built the mound. Pretty good joke, right? Pretty funny. That's exactly what they did. They made some copper plates. They etched out some strange symbols with some nitric acid onto those plates, bound them with an iron ring, kind of rubbed some dirt on them, rubbed some rust, make them look old, and then they buried them into the mound. So later on, when the rest of the team dug them up out of the mound, they thought that they had found an ancient record of the Native Americans. And one of the people who was helping to dig up the mounds was a Mormon. And he got really excited because the leader of the Mormons, Joseph Smith, the very founder of Mormonism, had claimed to be able to translate ancient languages, specifically ancient Native American languages. I mean, that was his whole story, was that he had been led by an angel to a set of golden plates buried in a mound. That's what Joseph Smith claimed. And that he was able, through the power of God, to translate this record, and from it he had translated the Book of Mormon. That's what the Book of Mormon is. It's a claimed record of these golden plates that Joseph Smith translated. And so the Mormon got really excited, and he took the Kinderhook plates to Joseph Smith, and when Joseph Smith saw them, he also got excited, because the very characters themselves looked like what he had claimed had been written on the Book of Mormon. They looked like reformed Egyptian. That's what Joseph Smith said was on the golden plates. So Joseph Smith, he looks at the Kinderhook plates and he claims to translate some of them. This was written in Joseph Smith's friend's journal, William Clayton, who was there when Joseph Smith was working with these Kinderhook plates. William Clayton writes in his journal that President Joseph has translated a portion, referring to the Kinderhook plates, and says they contain the history of the person with whom they were found, because there was a skeleton in the mound that they were found with. And he was a descendant of Ham, through the loins of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and that he received his kingdom from the ruler of heaven and earth. So that is what Joseph Smith said was on the Kinderhook plates, at least a portion of them. That the person who was in that burial mound was actually a descendant from the Pharaoh's, king of Egypt. Kind of interesting. And so this got spread across the church. And in the community. It got written in the church magazines, printed in the newspaper, Times and Seasons. And then, unfortunately, Joseph Smith never translated the entire set for several reasons. One, they were fake. You can't translate fake things. And so it's debated whether or not Joseph Smith actually knew they were fake, or because he never claimed to know, and he claimed to translated a portion of them, or if he was just busy and never got around to trying to translate them because he was busy being the mayor of Nauvoo, and he was killed shortly thereafter, just the very next year. So that's all debated. But later on, the people who actually made those Kinderhook plates, they came out of the woodwork and said, "Hey guys, it's a joke." Ha ha ha. You see, and this is what the quote was. Bridge Whitten, one of the people who made the Kinderhook plates, cut them out of some pieces of copper. Wiley and I made the hieroglyphs by making impressions on beeswax and filling them with acid and putting them on the plates. And then when they were finished, we put them together with a rust made of nitric acid, old iron, and lead, and bound them with a piece of hoop iron, covering them completely with rust. And so that was them coming out saying, "Hey guys, it was a joke." The thing was, since the members of the church and the leaders of the church believed them to be authentic and to actually collaborate in many ways the actual story of the Book of Mormon, those golden plates Joseph Smith had supposedly translated, they didn't believe them when they said it was a joke. They said, no, guys. The Kinderhook plates are real. You guys are lying, trying to claim to make them. But no, these guys, the Kinderhook plates are real. And they held on to that story for over 100 years because the Kinderhook plates were found in 1843. And up and through 1979, members of the church and leaders of the church said that these Kinderhook plates were authentic and contained some sort of religious record. But in 1980, the Kinderhook plates were subjected to scientific scrutiny. They were tested to see if the plates were actually ancient Native American or if they were modern forgeries. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about how did these plates, how did the scientists determine whether the plates were old or new, and if they were forgeries or not, the scientific methods from that. So here we go. And let me tell you give you a little bit of framework here for how we're going to approach this scientifically. There's two hypotheses to how these plates were formed. One, as the forgers described, they covered them in beeswax and etched out the characters and then used nitric acid to etch out in the metal these characters. So that was one way. The other way was that these were Native Americans, and the Native Americans had forged these brass plates and then using some sort of metal rod, some sort of pointy stick, etched these out by scratching them. And so what we're going to do, we're going to compare and contrast what would it look like if the plates were made by etching with acid, or if the plate characters were made by being scratched out with some sort of hard stick or some hard writing apparatus. Those are going to be the two methods. They both have distinctive signatures that we can look at to figure out whether these are old Native American Kinderhook plates or if they were modern forgeries made as a joke. Here we go.
Method 1. Modern etching via acid.
And so how the acid etching process worked was that people would cover the metal with wax. Wax is hydrophobic. It's very stable, has lots of carbon, has lots of hydrogen that's bound together. They're hydrocarbon fatty waxes that don't like to react. So they cover the metal with this non-reactive surface. And then what they can do is they can scratch out that wax. Just like when you're coloring like Easter eggs, they scratch out that wax, making little holes in the wax. And that's going to be where the acid can get through onto the metal surface. So you have your metal surface covered in wax, you scrape off the wax, you pour on the acid. Now the acid can get in contact with the metal where you scraped off the wax. That's why that's why this method was so useful today and back in the day, because it was fast. You can do beautiful artwork in the wax and then just put on your acid, and then you have this acid etched plate that you can use for printing, you can use it for art, you can do whatever you want. You can get these very detailed lines because you can make very detailed lines in the wax and then just pour on the acid to lead up the metal and you're good to go. So there you go. Acid etching 101. Now let's talk about the specific reaction that the forgers used in this metal etching process so that we can pick it apart and find out how to tell if they're forgeries.
So Wilbert Fugate, one of the men who claimed to make the Kinderhook plates, said that they used nitric acid to etch the characters on those plates. So let's look at that chemical reaction. We have copper, which is the main element in brass, which was used to make the Kinderhook plates. So we add some nitric acid, HNO3. And that is going to yield a copper nitrate. Add our nitrate, NO3, plus some nitrogen dioxide and some water. I think that balances 4, 2, yep, that all balances. So we're good there. So we have copper in the brass, nitric acid yielding a copper nitrate, nitrogen dioxide, and water. Now, water, of course, is a liquid, so that would have been washed off ages ago. Nitric dioxide is a gas, so that would have gassed off ages ago. And in fact, it's a really nasty gas. If you breathe it in, it actually makes nitric acid in your lungs, and then the nitric acid dissolves your lungs. So that's bad. But the copper nitrate, that leaves a precipitous solid. So if there's any copper nitrate residue left on the Kinderhook plates, we may be able to find it and identify this process was used in making those characters.
But just for fun, let's watch that reaction in action. And just a warning, the reaction's really fast. So get ready. You're going to see the copper already in the acid starting to bubble away. Ooh.
So we have our nitric acid and we have our copper. You can see it's starting to change and we see this reddish brown gas. This is your nitrogen dioxide. Same stuff that goes into smog, and you can see it bubbling, forming that gas. And if we add water, we can see the blue copper nitrate. You see that blue substance in the water? That is your blue copper nitrate, your residue that is left behind from the reaction.
Now this acid eats the metal because it's a redox reaction. What's happening is that the copper is being oxidized. It's losing electrons. It's giving those electrons to either the nitrogen or the water. It's losing electrons. And the nitrogen is being reduced. It is gaining those electrons. And what happens is when it forms these different compounds, when the copper forms the copper nitrate is soluble. Copper nitrate is a salt. When it goes into water, it disassociates and dissolves. Whereas copper, of course, that's solid. It stays there. And so what happens, so when you add the acid to the copper, you have this metal copper, you add the acid, it changes the copper into a salt through this redox reaction. And this salt, it's weak. It's just like when you rust iron, the rust just kind of flakes off. This salt, this copper nitrate, can wash off, it can flake off, leaving these etchings in the copper. So it's a redox reaction. And that's why you see the water turn blue. It's that the salt is blue, this blue copper salt that's going into the water. And why is copper sharing its electrons? That's because metals love to share the electrons. I mean, they're over there, electrons just swimming past them, zoop, zoop, zoop. They're like literally swimming in a sea of electrons. They're passing electrons around like missionaries passing pamphlets. So the copper loves to share these electrons, becomes oxidized and makes this salt. And then there you go. You got an acid that eats the metal. And you can tell from that reaction, it was pretty rigorous. It's good at it.
The thing to know what the acid treatment is, and here I have a bowl of water, for example, that I'm going to suck up some water here. The acid is only going to eat away at the metal where the acid touches it. So here I'm going to put some water here on my pan. And you can see that acid and water, aqueous liquids, they make these little droplets. And so the acid will only eat the metal where in these droplets. And so we're going to expect just basically kind of little droplets, little pocks to form at a microscopic level. The acid isn't going to touch every piece of the surface perfectly in this nice smooth pattern, but it's going to leave these little droplets, these little pocks that we should see at a microscopic level. Method 2. Ancient scratching with a tool. And so now let's talk about what happens when you etch something by scratching it with a piece of metal. So imagine that this mud right here is my metal plate, and that this comb is my metal writing apparatus that I'm going to use to scratch out characters, written language on my plate. Now, what happens is on a microscopic level, everything has bumps and crevices. And so just like this comb, there's a lot of different bumps. And so when I make my scratch, I get my main... Oh, that kind of worked. Okay, let's try that again. I get my main scratch, but you also see these little ridges right here, these striations that are running parallel to the way that I scratch. Just like when you scratch your car at the drive-thru at Wendy's, you're going to get a big old scratch, and running parallel to it, you'll get a bunch of little scratches due to the uneven nature of the surface. And that's exactly what we see at a microscopic level. Even if you have a smooth plate and just a really pointy writing apparatus, you'll still have these microscopic bumps that are going to cause these little striations, these little microscopic scratches running parallel to the scratch. So if the plates were created by an ancient person scratching them,
then we would expect to see these types of microscopic striations running along the scratch. Yeah, let's see if I can make some more. And this mud is not the best writing tool. I guess that's why you gotta use paper or plates or something. And also, this comb is destroyed. Oh, well, I guess I can't comb my hair anymore. What do you do?
And so we have two different end members that we're looking for when we run our scientific experiments. Either we're going to see these microscopic scratches running parallel to the characters, indicating that the characters were made by scratching by some sort of ancient person, presumably. Or we're going to see little pocks, little bits, little ponds, little spots where the acid was dropped and ate through the metal via that chemical reaction that we talked about earlier. So let's see what the lab found. So one of the plates was taken to Dr. Johnson of the Department of Materials Science and Engineering at Northwestern University in 1980. And there he used a scanning electron microscope, which is that microscope that zooms in really close so we can see those possible microscopic scratches. And they looked at the plate, and this is what he saw. Yep, that looks like our acid pockmarks, not our microscopic scratches. Nitric acid for the win, baby. And when he was looking at the scanning electron microscope, he also saw these interesting residues inside of the characters. So he used another method called auger electron spectroscopy, which is where you have this apparatus, and basically it shoots a very fine beam of electrons at that residue that allows him to identify the composition of that residue. And what did he find? He found that the residue was copper nitrate. Just what we would expect to see based off of that chemical reaction that we talked about earlier. And so by identifying that there were no scratch marks inside of the characters, that there was the acid pock marks, and that there was that copper nitrate residue, was pretty conclusive that the characters, the plate, was created via acid etching, just as the forgers had attested to, and not via some ancient means. So yeah, they were indeed modern fakes. But just so he could be super conclusive, he also took a sample of the metal itself. He got some of the powder from the brass plate itself, and he also ran X-ray fluorescence on it, X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy, where he basically shot that powder of metal with X-rays, and similar to the auger electron spectroscopy, when you shoot a powder with X-rays, it will also emit energy in a very characteristic pattern, allowing the bulk sample to be identified. And what they found was that the brass was made out of approximately 73% copper and 24% zinc, a fairly clean brass alloy, which would not have been possible to create via ancient means, because if it was an ancient brass alloy, it would have a lot more residue, a lot more impurities, a lot more slag. But because this brass was so clean, it had to have been created by modern means. Thus, it was not an ancient Native American plate. It was in fact a modern fake. And so through the power of shooting electrons at stuff and by shooting X-rays at stuff, we're able to put to rest this century-old debate whether these plates were ancient or modern fakes. Which is funny to me that the people who made the plates literally were like, hey guys, it was a joke, we made them. And everyone's just like, no you didn't, they're ancient. And he was like, no, really, I made the thing yesterday. I can show you, but no one believed him anyway. And so over a century of debate, finally science was able to put it to rest, showing that the Kinderhook plates were in fact modern forgeries, modern fakes created by making brass alloy and etching them with acid. And since that time, the Mormon or LDS Church has admitted that, yeah, they were fakes, and no longer claims to have any sort of religious significance other than this interesting history. So get ready so there you go. There is the prequel to looking at religious forgeries inside of Mormonism.
And next time we're going to talk a lot more about Mark Hofmann, because this was the prequel. The Netflix documentary comes out this week. I hope to watch at least some of it. And then we'll talk more about what Mark Hofmann did next time, and the science exactly of what he did and how they were able to catch him through science, baby. So anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. Ciao.